let's be very clear. Let's get this on the record. I want to lose a lot.
Greetings and welcome to the Big Easy Sports Talk podcast. My name is Nick Garisco, and today I'm here with Michael Pelican for your local sports podcast, episode 6. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at BestPodcastNola. Today we're going to be discussing the NBA draft and where the Pelicans stand in the lottery odds. With the March Madness Tournament going on, we'll get into what we can look for in particular prospects for the upcoming NBA draft. But first, let's tip off with what I think is the Pelicans' story of the week, and that's Elfrid Payton's streak of triple-doubles has just come to an end at 5 consecutive triple-doubles. Russell Westbrook, Oscar Robertson, Wilt Chamberlain, and Michael Jordan, and now Elfrid Payton, are the only players to ever have 5 straight triple-doubles in their NBA careers. I'm talking Russell Westbrook, Oscar Robertson, Wilt Chamberlain, Michael Jordan, and now Elfrid Payton. So this is some rare statistical company here. Michael, let's kind of talk about what it really means to have 5 straight triple-doubles.
Statistically, it's an incredible accomplishment. I don't mean, and I think when I go into this, it'll sound like I'm being a little bit harsh, because this is certainly something that, if it's only been done a few times in NBA history, that's something to be applauded. But we've been losing a lot of games recently. So, I mean, would I rather someone have a bunch of triple doubles, or would I rather be winning basketball games aside from all the lottery odds and stuff like that? And the answer is clearly I'd rather whatever's happening statistically to be translating into actual wins. So I think if you look at that, that's certainly coloring the context a little bit, is that we're losing a lot of games right now. But to be doing that at guard is actually particularly impressive, because it's typically harder for a guard to get triple doubles than, let's just say, a bigger swing like a 6'7", 6'8" guy, because it's hard to get 10 rebounds if you're a guard consistently, and especially 5 times in a row. I think a lot of it is really he's getting a lot of minutes. Drew's out, and ultimately we just don't have another primary ball handler who's capable of running an NBA offense. And you can argue whether Payton's even capable of doing that at a starter level, but I do think that you have to be asking those kind of questions. And years ago, this is to me the perfect example, is Greivis Vasquez was averaged 13 and 9 on a Pelicans team, well, a Hornets team at that time, and we were really bad. And people were saying, "Oh, but Vasquez is putting up these great stats." And if you have the ball in your hands that much, you're bound to be putting up stats, if that makes sense.
Right. Well, there's always that talk about when Russell Westbrook is going for his NBA average for a season triple-double and everything like that, that Westbrook's kind of padding his stats. But I don't know, sometimes I can take issue to that argument, because if a guard is getting rebounds at this rate, that sounds awesome. I really like that he's being aggressive and he's putting himself in position to be getting those rebounds. Everyone should be really going for rebounds like that. But at the same time, maybe he's not getting back on defense. Maybe he's, trying. Is that necessarily his job, if you will? So sometimes I kind of wonder if it is more of a stat padding kind of situation, or if this is just a really great accomplishment.
I think part of it, too, with Payton getting the rebounds is that Davis isn't out there. So, I mean, in theory, if you do get rebounds, someone's getting that rebound, right? So if Davis is the guy getting the majority of the rebounds, that means everybody else isn't grabbing those rebounds. So I think having Davis off the floor puts the onus on someone else to pick up some of the rebounding slack. Randall's a pretty good rebounder. He's not an amazing rebounder like Davis is. So I think some of that is, Drew's not there anymore. So, you're talking about someone's going to have to do that. So I think that's part of the reason that Payton's putting up the rebounding numbers that he's putting up right now. So
right. And these aren't just normal triple doubles. These aren't like, he's getting 10 points, maybe 11 assists and 10 rebounds. Like, he's barely meeting the threshold there. He's had some really good games where he's been putting up, 24 points. Maybe I saw there was one game where he had 16 assists. And then, the rebounds are obviously going to be harder to come by, but he's had a couple of games with more than 12. So I'm pretty impressed with Payton. Is this something that it speaks to his level of play, or is this just more of an opportunity thing where, like you said, he's getting the minutes, Anthony Davis isn't out there? Is this something that we can look forward to going next season if we were to re-sign him, or should we kind of take this with a skeptical eye or a grain of salt?
I think that you're right that we should definitely treat this skeptically. Payton's actually done this several years in a row. I mean, so when he was in Orlando, he did this. This is something to where at the end of the season, when your prerogative is different, when you're not trying to necessarily win, but rather develop your pieces, the level of responsibility, or I should say the consequences to not winning are not there. So in that, you get a lot of freedom, and I think that we should be skeptical. I do think he's playing just fine. I think he's a fine player. I think one of the things that I worry about with him is his ability to score at all three levels and how he's still pretty inefficient as a scorer. And that's, he's like 24, 25 years old. He's been in the league for a few years. I think his three-point shot is improving. I think at the end of his career, in the next few years, he'll wind up being a respectable spot-up shooter. But spotting up and pulling up off the dribble are very different things. And I don't know if he'll ever be someone who pulls off the dribble enough in an NBA lead guard where I'd really want him to be that. And that's my question about Payton is can he pull up off the dribble? Can he wind up having an in-between game? I know he can get to the rim. He's big. He's fast. He can get to the rim against his own guy because he usually has a size advantage. So I think all those things are there. But again, until he starts scoring at all three levels, I'm always going to be a little skeptical of how far he can go as an NBA player.
Right, and this is meaningless if he's not going to be re-signed by the Pelicans. Again, he's entering free agency this offseason, from what I understand, and now that Anthony Davis is going to likely be shipped off this offseason, we have this team, and I guess we're building around Drew Holiday. And the question the Pelicans really need to ask themselves in terms of re-signing Payton is he a guy who can fit with Drew Holiday? Do their skill sets complement each other well? What's your take on that?
I think the problem with it, because we can talk about Drew, and Drew's really only weakness is that he's not a great three-point shooter. And I think in today's NBA, it's really, really hard to have two guys who aren't at least. I don't want to say Drew's not a threat, but they're not a threat enough to where defenses really have to exert pressure that far out. Now, this season they've gotten away with it. Before they started basically sitting Davis and all of that, they were an excellent offense. And part of that was really just because, though, Randall and Davis are really, really good in the paint. So I think that is sort of an anomaly in terms of, you don't have two high-volume scorers at the big positions and on many teams. So I think that was kind of why the offense was humming the way that it was. So I do think once that is eliminated, once you get rid of at least Davis, possibly Randall, I think the way that the offense is going to be run is just not, it's not going to be as good. And so I have some concerns about pairing two guards who are non-shooters in those types of offenses.
It seems like we've been needing a three-point shooter for a while. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'd say Moore. I'd say Moore is kind of the three-point shooter that we need. The problem is that Moore isn't big enough to play the swing by himself. Now, most nights you can get away with sliding Drew to the three defensively. I think, and Payton's got some size as well, so you have a little bit of flexibility there. But I think it's really, really hard in today's NBA to win without at least one guy who's 6'7", 6'8", can slide between positions 1 through 4 pretty easily on defense. And I think that's been holding us back. So even though Etuan Moore was very, very good offensively for us, because he was really shooting extremely well at the beginning of this year before he fell off a cliff, I think that it's really, really hard to not have that kind of guy. So that's, like you're saying, I think we need the shooter, and we have a shooter, but we need it at a specific position, or we need, if you have two guards who are non-shooters, and then you don't have it's either Etuan Moore to shoot threes, right, and you give up stuff on defense, or you wind up getting a three who's a non-shooter, and then you really have issues.
Right. It seems like out of your three guards, you're going to want at least two of them, or definitely at least one of them, to be a guy who can hit maybe 2 3-pointers a game consistently. Yeah,
I think so. I think you should have at least. It's really hard in the NBA playoffs to hide even one non-shooter. So if we're talking about moving forward, if we ever want to become something, even if someone's really good, it's really hard to hide a non-shooter in the NBA playoffs. So it's like at some point you have to evaluate, even if you're doing well in the regular season against more subpar defenses than you'll face in the playoffs. It's kind of like, well, for what's the point? I mean, we need to have at least 2 guys on the perimeter who can really shoot. And because Drew is not, again, he's not a terrible shooter or anything like that, but Drew is not a great 3-point shooter. And I'd say if Drew ever became that, I mean, he would be unstoppable.
Right. I want to know in terms of the evaluation for whether we're going to retain Elfrid Payton or just let him, test free agency. Obviously, that evaluation kind of turns on who we have to replace Elfrid Payton. And Frank Jackson, another point guard that we have, how has his development been going? And is he a better shooter? Can he kind of fill that void in the shooting perspective that Payton maybe could not?
Yeah, we've talked about Jackson before, and I think I still believe that Frank Jackson will wind up being a really good NBA shooter. Not a leader or anything like that, but I do think he'll be in the 37 to 38% range at the end of it all. Right now he's shooting 31%, which is super low, but that's just a typical rookie thing. It takes a while to adjust to NBA range. Kevin Durant, I want to say, shot like 27 or 28% in his first year. So, I mean, I'm not worried at all about Frank Jackson's shot yet.
Yeah, this is the first time he's getting a lot of playing time. And his minutes have been up substantially just because I don't want to say we're full on in tank mode. That's another conversation, of course, which we might even have later. But it's more along the lines of Drew's not playing, AD's not playing. So not only his minutes are up, his usage is up too. I mean, he's scored in double figures probably for the last 5 or 6 games in a row, which is something that he hadn't done consistently when his minutes were in the teens.
Yeah, and I think like you were asking who the right guard is to pair with Drew Holiday.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to depend. It's kind of a weird mix because Drew is sort of a point guard and has been for his career. Then they slid him to more of a scoring role, and they like to alleviate the pressure of ball handling on him in terms of running the offense.
I like that too.
So
I've always thought the Pelicans are better when we have a true point guard there, whether it's Elfrid Payton or whether it's Rondo. I've always thought the Pelicans play much better when Drew is at the 2.
I think so too, and I think that's what makes it difficult though, is because you really need a guy who can both shoot and run the offense. So you're looking for a very specific combination of skills. Now, because Drew is such an excellent defender, that makes things much easier in terms of what you have to have on defense in that combination. So I think you can actually have a smaller guard because Drew can defend anybody 1 or 2 for sure, even some threes, and I'd say a lot of threes.
Yeah, I just don't think Frank Jackson is ready to take that role as the distributor yet.
I don't think yet, and I don't think he ever will, honestly. I like Frank Jackson. I think if you actually look at Frank Jackson's per 36s among younger guards who are rookies, and I say younger because I don't want to count guards who are 24 or 25 entering the league. That's not the same evaluation. I think if you look at those kind of players, Frank Jackson doesn't stack up that poorly. Frank Jackson has a pretty solid resume on a per 36 basis versus some pretty good NBA guards. I mean, there are enough things to like there. I mean, he's a very, very good athlete. He's got an awesome first step. He's got good body control. Again, I think the issue that Frank will have is when he's playing against starting caliber players, especially starting caliber bigs who can block shots. I think he'll have to be a little bit more creative in how he attacks the basket. But I think his rhythm is really good when he shoots. I think he's going to wind up I think he uses his legs probably a little too much for my liking. I think he'll wind up being a good shooter, though. He really is on balance a lot. I think he's got good composure. From all that I've heard about him, I think he's supposed to be an excellent kid. I think there are a lot of things there that I like.
So it seems like, to me, everything you're saying, a guy who's able to score and you think he's going to be a better scorer, it seems like everything to me you're saying is that he's going to be a perfect guy running the second unit, right?
Yeah, I'd say so. Or like even as a guy who is just a scoring punch on the second unit, maybe not running the show necessarily, but at least being, like exactly like you're saying, a second unit guy. I think if you had someone in the same way that Drew probably isn't meant to run the offense, he's better when he's not. I think Frank would be the same way. So I think that would make a Frank and Drew combination somewhat limited. But then you would also have 2 ball handlers. I mean, I think there's something to be said about that as well. So I don't think he's a perfect fit next to Drew, but I do think that there's some potential there.
So the Pelicans are projected to have a top 10 pick in the NBA draft this summer. But before we get into the lottery odds and everything like that, and before we even get into specific prospects, because a lot of these guys are playing right now during the March Madness Tournament. It's fun to watch them and kind of imagine them in a Pelicans uniform. But before we get into all that, I really want to know if this is a kind of best player available situation at pick. Let's say we end up with, picks 7 through 9 or something like that. Is this a best player available situation because we just have so many needs other than maybe, Drew's position? Or is this do we want to fill a big man because Anthony Davis is leaving and possibly Julius Randle or do we want a distributing point guard like we've been talking about? Is there a favorite at the type of position we're looking for to address with our first round pick? Or is this we just have so many needs right now that it's probably best to stick to our board and take best player available?
Yeah, I think because it's very different from the NFL where you might be looking for a positional fit and the positions are much more clearly defined. And the NBA is certainly you're looking like what you're saying. You're looking for the best player. So the way that an NBA team is typically built is that whenever you figure out a way to get superstars or quasi-stars, whatever, top 20 players, then you start building around them based on their strengths and their limitations. That's the way that it really should be done. So you're looking for those elite pieces however you can get them. So let's just pretend we trade the Celtics and we get Tatum back. Okay, well, we have Tatum and Drew. That's a lot of the scoring load right there.
Right.
Okay, so, who's going to be the distributor? Are we going to build a versatile defense where we have multiple guys who can switch between positions? I mean, that's where you get into more of the, I guess, logistics of how do we put people around these two guys versus, well, what if we don't get Tatum? What if we get someone else? Then you're having an entirely different kind of conversation. So it's really about getting those best players in whatever way. If it's pick, 8, 10, 12 or whatever, if it's Tatum, whatever it is, when you start getting your top guys, that's when you start filling in the gaps.
Would you be surprised if Anthony Davis isn't dealt by the draft? Because I feel like it would set the Pelicans back in terms of building their team and their identity and kind of their philosophy on offense and in defense if we didn't know exactly. You bring up Jason Tatum, and he'd be great to get back, but if we didn't know we were going to have Jason Tatum and then we spent our 7th through 9th pick on a guy who is very, very similar, or at least stylistically, to Jason Tatum, that kind of seems like it would be not detrimental to the Pelicans because you want to take stars anytime you get, and it's just about the player hitting ultimately. But it kind of seems like the Pelicans need to have a plan, I guess. And to me, trading Anthony Davis and getting something in return, that's going to be a big aspect of that plan and how we develop the team around that. So do you think that Davis is traded before the draft?
Man, I think it really depends on what the Celtics want to do. I think the more and more I see here, I feel like it's going to be one of 4 teams that had the highest chance of landing Davis.
Okay.
I think it's going to be the Celtics, the Lakers, the Knicks, or the Bulls.
So you threw the Bulls in there. Who do they have to offer that the Pelicans might be interested in?
So they have Zach LaVine, they have Lauri Markkanen, and they're going to wind up having a really good pick. So really, I mean, even if it's just one of those guys plus a high pick, that could be something. Depending on the leverage the Pelicans have, I could see too. I don't necessarily think that's the case, but I think that's the kind of team where that would require Chicago wanting to take a chance. So that's to me the wild card in all of this. And Davis is from Chicago. I don't know how much they'd really want Davis. They're not a particularly well-run franchise, right. So I don't think. Yeah, I'm not looking for them to be necessarily objective. You could say the same about the Knicks.
They're pretty conservative, the Bulls are, and I just don't know if they would. I could see them taking the plunge on Anthony Davis, maybe to put fans back in the seats and stuff like that. But I don't know if I see them taking the plunge on a second All-Star, which I know was what Anthony Davis probably wants, right?
I mean, I think they would if they got Davis. I think that you're right that they would. There's a question as to whether they would want to take that chance that Davis is there for 1 year and they've either dealt, one or two of their stars out of there, so they're starting from scratch again. I mean, they've been pretty bad for a few years now. Well, I mean, they had dead Butler, so I guess that's not necessarily true, but I think that's still one of the teams, and I still go back to New York. I think there's a chance there because I think New York could possibly get KD this summer. I think that would be a fairly reasonable thing to expect, whether it's KD and Kyrie or KD and Davis. I think those are both possibilities. So the good news is for the Pelicans is this: that as long as there are 2 or 3 teams who are really trying to throw their hats in the ring to get Davis, the Pelicans have leverage, and teams aren't going to play around with their offers. So as to your question about whether they deal before the draft, I mean, I think part of it depends upon Boston, who probably has the best offer. And if Boston thinks that Kyrie's going to walk, do they still want Davis? I don't know. I mean, I think that's a legitimate question to be asked.
Absolutely. And does Boston have a high pick in this draft or no?
Not a high pick. They have multiple picks in the future, and they have a few this year too. So I mean, that's where you get into. They don't necessarily have the elite pick that someone who is for sure going to be at the top of the lottery this year would have. They could wind up having a very good pick from Memphis, depending on where Memphis falls. But I think to me, Tatum, I would much rather take someone who I think is almost sure to be a top 20 NBA player than to take a shot in the draft for anybody besides maybe Zion, because it's just hard. Sometimes players just don't pan out, and players who look like they have all this potential and they're going to be great players, they just don't click in the NBA because it's such a different game. So I would take Tatum over any of those guys.
It seems
besides Zion, man.
Yeah, and I'm going to even throw John Morant in there. It seems like there's kind of a drop-off after those two. You could argue the drop-off after Zion, of course, but it seems like Morant, from the guard from Murray State, I mean, I watched him play the other night. I mean, geez, there's now talks of, not NBA talks of him going on, but a lot of fans are, talking like, oh, maybe this guy's just as good as Zion. And I was kind of rolling my eyes, as a Duke fan. I've been watching Zion, and he just looks like the real deal. But Morant looks pretty incredible. I watched him the other day in Murray State's first game, but he looks awesome, and I think he's going to be the clear-cut number 2 pick. So, and I don't know who's going to be picks 3 through 7, for example. So I think that there's kind of a drop-off after pick 2, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe whoever had pick 3, maybe it'll be us, but I wouldn't be surprised if they maybe trade down or something like that, because there doesn't seem to be a clear-cut third best player in this draft. It's been interesting watching the March Madness Tournament, because the NCAA tournament being going on. If you could just Google any NBA mock draft, and I know the lottery odds aren't set yet, but you see a bunch of names. I have one in front of me right now where it's Zion Williamson, Ja Morant, R.J. Barrett out of Duke. Zion Williamson's out of Duke. Kobe White is out of North Carolina. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name, I'll be honest, but I've seen him play at Gonzaga. I think it's Rui Hachimura. I apologize for the butchering of his pronunciation, but I know that he's an incredible player for Gonzaga. I've seen him play. Keldon Johnson, guard out of Kentucky. DeAndre Hunter, forward out of Virginia. I'm just reading straight down. I'm not skipping any names. Jarrett Culver is projected to go pick 8 in this mock, Texas Tech. And Cam Reddish picked 9 to the New Orleans Pelicans, and he's out of Duke, of course. So I've just read you all 9 names. And I know it's just one mock, but generally mocks are going to be something like something along these lines. And I'm noticing that all these guys, with the exception of Morant, who we've been talking about, are still in the tournament, which is fun to watch. Every single one of them, 8 out of 9 of them, are still in the tournament right now. We're in the second round of the tournament, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty cool to be able to watch these guys. What are some things that we should be looking for as the draft comes this summer?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that I look for in any NBA prospect is we're looking for elite players, right? So if we're looking at the draft, we're trying to find a top 5, top 10 NBA guy, which is incredible, and obviously that's very hard to do. But I'm looking for a guy. The best NBA players are ones who can score efficiently enough by themselves to where they can be scoring 25 to 30 points a game at an efficient level. But not just that, they want to be scoring in a way that creates for their teammates as well. And then so once that creation is available because they get double teamed or whatever, can they pass out of it? Can they play make for other people? Though to me, that is what I look for in any NBA star. And if they don't have that, it's pretty hard to be a star. I think you can get into the kind of outliers from all of that. Someone like Draymond Green, Draymond Green's an excellent player and is a perfect complementary player. But if I'm looking for my first player, Draymond Green would be great in any team. and I'm not trying to slander him.
But he's not going to be your leading scorer, though.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. If they put him in a different role where he was trying to score 25 a night, he wouldn't be good. He just wouldn't. His 3-point shot's not great right now, and that's where he doesn't have a lot of pressure on him on offense, and he gets open shots. So, I mean, to me, I'm looking specifically for the ability to score really, really well, and then once teams start throwing multiple defenders at him, the ability to pass out of it, those kinds of things. That, to me, those are the most important skills.
So right now, it looks like the New York Knicks are projected to, at least in terms of the odds, projected to get the number 1 pick. I think it's between them and the Phoenix Suns. You can correct me if I'm wrong. That's just out of memory. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it's weird this year. So they just revamped the lottery. So there's actually 3 teams that had the exact same chance for the number 1 pick. It's New York, Phoenix, and Cleveland. Yeah, and then they have the odds are more evenly distributed across those top teams. So, but they're still in general. So it used to be top 3, and the way that it was done is the lottery would be done for the top 3 picks, and then after that it goes worst team to best team. So that you're really only drawing for those 3 spots, and then it's just set in reverse order.
I hate that.
So now it's going to be. I like it. I mean, well, first the lottery system has all kinds of issues, right? So. I do think so. Now it's top 4. So basically, once the top 4 is said, then you reverse the order of the standings to where the worst team gets the 5th, the worst team remaining gets the 5th pick, etc.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, so like those teams are going to wind up having really good picks, and that's a good thing for the Pelicans because you want teams who have a good chance at those high picks to be possibly trading the Pelicans. So I think that's unequivocally a good thing.
So we have 7 games left, I believe. These last games are obviously pretty important in terms of seeding for the lottery. And I'm not saying, of course, that we're trying to throw all these games, but I know there are a couple of teams that are within a few games of each other. And with 7 or 8 games left for every team, it seems like right now teams that are, whether it's a submissive or passive tank or just a proactive tanking situation here, that I would argue the Pelicans are in. I would say they're borderline passive and active. But you know, with Anthony Davis out and Etuan Moore out and Drew Holiday out, I think you can make the argument that we're pretty actively tanking here, if not being proactive about it. But right now, these games mean a lot in terms of the order, I guess. And I know it seems like a couple of percentage points, but right now, where do the Pelicans stand exactly right now? And where could we be if, I don't want to say if great things happen to us, because it is losing, of course, but if things fall into place, where could the Pelicans be?
So when we talked about this a while ago, what I'm actually surprised about is that there's a possibility Memphis is just trying to get rid of their liability to get rid of their pick now because they have protections on their pick. So because it's conditional, like certain circumstances would lead them to keep their pick this year, get rid of it next year, etc. So there's a possibility they're just trying to get out of it and get rid of that liability now so they can own their pick for the future and have that hanging over their heads. Someone mentioned that kind of shocked me. I thought Memphis would be just outright tanking. They were in a really good position. So as of now, like you said, there's a real clustering of picks 6 through 9.
Yeah.
And actually 6 through 10. I'm worried a lot about the Lakers, who have been terrible. I think that the Lakers could leapfrog us in terms of standings and in the sense of like they could be worse than us at the end of the year.
Right.
We have 43 losses. The teams ahead of us, 6, 7, and 8, have 44. So with these remaining, I think it's 7 or 8 games. So we have 8 games left.
Where did the Lakers stand?
So right now, Lakers are 31 and 41. So they have 41 The way to look at it is losses, right? So they have 41 losses on the books. We have 43. So the most losses we can get is 8 more because we have 8 games left. So we could get up to 51 losses. That would put us in a really solid spot. It's like terrible to say that, but I mean that's the truth.
And the Lakers have been. LeBron's had all these knick-knack injuries all of a sudden, and they've been resting him. So I think it's easily fair to say that the Lakers are now in that tanking mode now that they've been eliminated from the playoffs. And so, the Lakers could catch us, really. So it sounds like we're going for pick 6, if I had to say. Like, realistically speaking, is that kind of our ceiling in terms of how high we could pick in this draft? Well, not again, it is a lottery, of course, but in terms of our odds.
Right. Yeah, I think you nailed it. So to me, 6 is before I thought it was 7. I think it's 6 now. There's a possibility. of 6 that I did not think would be there. So I do think that we could, in theory, catch Memphis if they keep playing the way they do. But I do think that it's more plausible that someone else would catch them first. So the Lakers are 1-9 their last 10. So yeah, any game. First of all, LeBron was keep getting them to a mediocre level, and that's LeBron. So I mean, if LeBron's sitting any game, like they're really Lonzo's not playing right now. Like they don't have a lot.
They're
so
relying
I
on,
could
like,
see us
Caldwell Pope and other guys to score. It's guys who really shouldn't be the main options there.
Yeah, so to me, I mean, if we're looking at, again, so it's not just about that top pick, it's about the top 4. So Memphis at 6 right now has a 34.8% chance. And they're tied, actually, looks like they're tied with Dallas. So I think they have some sort of weird tiebreaker in there right now as a placeholder. But it's like 34.8, 34.5 for the top 4, which is pretty solid. And
Very
then
solid.
Drops at 8 to Washington to 26.3, Pelicans at 20.3. What I'm worried about, I don't want to go lower than 10 because at that level you have a 9.4% chance for the top 4 pick, and you have a 2% chance for the top pick. So that's Minnesota right now. Yeah.
So what are we at right now? You said we rank 9th right now. What are we at in terms of our odds for getting a top 4 pick?
So at this moment, we have a 1 in 5 chance. We have a 20.3 chance.
Okay.
So,
and what about the top pick overall? Is that a 5% chance?
4.5.
Okay, yeah.
4.5. So between 1 and 25 and
So we have about a 9% chance of getting either Ja Morant or Zion Williamson as of now. Is that right?
Yeah, it's
go ahead.
9.3 by the way. Yeah. I looked it up.
Yeah, so about 9%. So right now the Pelicans probably have about a 9% chance to end up with what I think is a bona fide superstar prospect here. And that's pretty good. That's more than I would have expected. And a 20% chance to end up with a top 4 pick overall, which is also pretty good there. But you're saying that if we move up to 6 and are in Memphis's shoes right now, what will those odds be for the same thing? For first the top pick overall, then the first and second pick, and then the top 4 pick.
Yeah, so we basically double our chances for one of those top 2 guys. I don't think it's necessarily as clear-cut for Ja Morant. I do think that given what we're seeing, that there's a strong possibility that he would be number 2. I agree. I also don't think there's any chance he's getting taken before Zion, given that nothing happens to Zion between now and then.
Of course.
But yeah, you're talking about 18% between those two. If we're getting up to 6 where Memphis is right now. So that you're basically effectively doubling your chances at that. And 1 in 5 is not amazing, but 1 in 5 is pretty solid. And again, it's not just about the actual lottery, it's about because it's set to the reverse order of the standings after the lottery is played out, after those top 4 spots are occupied.
It's about who goes before
you're talking about right. So if you're like, let's just say, even if you're leapfrogged or whatever, being in 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever, because it's set to the reverse order of the standings after those top 4, you're talking about 2 or 3 slots after that. So each one, I mean, again, the NBA draft is really a crapshoot. I think people just assume that they're going to get good prospects really outside of that top 5 and even sometimes in the top 5. Like you are just really, you're hoping for the best, but these guys are young. The NBA game is very different from all the other different games that people are playing. Now, if you're playing in a professional league, it's probably easier to evaluate. Like Luka Doncic last year was incredible before he came over in Europe. So it was a little bit easier to evaluate someone like him in a great league like that.
He still fell a little in the draft, though. He didn't go. What was he, picked 4 or 6 or something like that?
He wound up being 3, and that was because there were some concerns about he didn't have elite athleticism, and someone like DeAndre Ayton certainly you could see having a higher ceiling.
Right.
Doncic was different because Doncic was so big and so skilled and so good at such a young age. That in that way he was much more of an outlier than his actual athletic ability, and I think that's why he fell some.
Gotcha. And who was the second overall pick last year?
That's right, it's Bagley. I think Bagley's going to wind up being really good, though.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Bagley's going to be a really good player. I don't know if he'll ever become a great defensive player, but I think his ability to finish in the pick and roll is outstanding. I think he moves really, really well up and down the floor. He's a great athlete as well. I think he's going to wind up being really good. But I do think it's pretty clear at this point that at this moment, Doncic seems to be the best prospect from that draft. So, I mean, he's been something else, man. He's a great player.
Yeah, and I've been watching Duke Of course. And they have two other guys other than Zion who are projected to be top 10 NBA lottery picks. Cam Reddish and RJ Barrett out of Duke. They're all projected to be, along with Zion, is projected to be top 10 picks. Zion, of course, going number 1. But I've been watching Duke, and it just seems like there's such a substantial drop-off after Zion and those, and RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish. Just it's amazing to me how much you can just watch Duke from an outsider's eye and still even think like, okay, this Zion guy is the real deal. He's going to be an incredible NBA player. But it's almost like RJ Barrett and Cam Reddish. It's not like it is almost like that Zion's just totally overshadowing them, because with Zion on that team, they don't even look like, when you're watching Duke, you would never even think that these guys are also going to be top 10 lottery picks as well. And it just seems like Zion really does overshadow them, and it kind of has me worried that, if the Pelicans are pick 8 or something like that, and we have to end up with, somebody like Cam Reddish, for example, that the drop-off there is just so steep and substantial from Zion. Like with Zion, you're getting almost, I wouldn't say a legend, but somebody who's really going to alter the course of your franchise and be a really prolific player. And I kind of wanted to bring this up for this reason. I'm wondering what would happen if the Lakers ended up with the first pick, because I'm wondering if there would be a lot of outcry and objection to it, thinking that the league was kind of rigging the lottery. And I know that that's kind of been a conversation that people have had in the past. It was even mentioned a lot with Anthony Davis when the Pelicans drafted him after the Chris Paul debacle. But I'm wondering what would, after this season's gone with LeBron, and knowing that there's so much money to be had if the Lakers are a great historic franchise again, or a great successful franchise, and knowing that LeBron obviously needs more help than was previously indicated going into this season, what would happen if the Lakers actually got the first pick in this lottery? Do you think there'd be a lot of backlash for the commissioner?
I mean, I don't know if there would actually be real ramifications, but I do think, like you're saying, the optics would be terrible. I mean, they would just be like, oh, okay, yeah, really? And then, I think at that point, if they got the number 1 pick, I don't think there's, in my mind, I think it would be the Lakers would give us that trade, and I think we would take it. I don't think there's any doubt, because I don't think, I think if you look at LeBron's history, first of all, LeBron got Wiggins traded for Love years ago, and that was with the number 1, he was a number 1 pick. But I think for sure if they got that pick, man, they're trading it to the Pelicans, and the Pelicans are,
wow.
Even if they're rubbed the wrong way from everything that happened earlier, I think it was more on the agent side than the Lakers side necessarily, with what happened with that whole Davis saga. But they're trading because LeBron has a small window. The Lakers wanted him there, like they're trying to build something, they're trying to build a winner now, like. They think that they can just like leverage their big market to wins and stuff like that. Like they're not worried about the future or being prudent. They're trying to get wins now, and I think that would happen.
To be clear, if the Lakers got the first pick in the draft, you think that they would trade it to the Pelicans for Anthony Davis?
Yeah, I would say strong. I have a strong.
They would give up Zion Williamson.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah, I think so. Oh yeah, because I don't think. Zion's not going to be, no matter how good of an NBA player you are coming out of college or just being a rookie, you're not going to be an elite NBA player for at least a couple years. There's just so much to learn on defense. There's so much to learn about the way the NBA game is played. Even if you're a high-impact player as a rookie, like you're really not translating your performance into a lot of wins. That's such an anomaly to be, like, I mean, LeBron, you could maybe argue as a rookie was that good. But I mean, that's. Are
you suggesting that the Pelicans fans maybe should be rooting for the Lakers to get the first overall pick, even though it is even more unlikely than the Pelicans as of now?
I would argue that I would want someone in the East. Not that honestly, we're so far away from being a contender at this point once we trade Davis that it might not be relevant. But I would much prefer to trade Davis out East for the same player in Zion and then maybe different prospects.
Would you rather Jason Tatum or Zion?
That is a really hard question.
Yeah, if they were just presented to you straight up right now, who would you rather?
Straight up right now. Man, that is really hard.
Yeah, I don't know.
I would take the chance. I would take the chance on Zion, but I wouldn't feel good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd feel pretty great about
nervous.
it either because I'm actually not totally convinced, believe it or not, I'm not totally convinced that the Celtics are going to even offer us Tatum. I know that's been the talk since it started, but I don't know if they're not going to get cold feet or something like that. Like you said, Kyrie might leave. They might feel like they're further away than people think, and I'm just not totally convinced they will offer Tatum. So, yeah, I'm going to have to go with Zion on that one. But certainly there's a lot of really interesting storylines here from, I was thinking that the league, everyone would be rolling their eyes if the Lakers got the first pick, seeing what the league has done.
Oh, they will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
that'd definitely be the case.
I didn't think of it from a perspective that that pick might be traded to us, and that would actually be good for the Pelicans if the Lakers did get that pick. So it's almost like if it's not us, then, it should probably be them. But you're right. It does put yet another superstar in the Western Conference, which sucks. And it just seems like the Western Conference is just getting better and better and better each year. We just had Porzingis go to the Western Conference. And then, of course, the top NBA rookie of this year, Luka Doncic, he is also in the Western Conference. It seems like the Western Conference really just can't catch a break.
It's a joke, man. It's crazy how much better it is, and I don't get how it keeps happening. But I mean, yeah. I think if even this is actually interesting because we've talked at least a couple times about legacy. I think on this podcast, and so LeBron James carried really, really weak teams to the finals in the East for years,
right? And now the optics aren't so good, right? Because now the first year he's in the Western Conference. Yeah, and
he can't make the playoffs.
Yeah,
and granted, with a terrible team or not a great team, terrible might be a little bit of a stretch. Not good supporting cast, and he can't even make the playoffs.
But
and that's nothing against LeBron, but
terrible as some of those Cavaliers teams, right? In terms of some of those Cavaliers teams that LeBron did actually carry to the finals. Maybe they didn't win, but that he actually carried the finals were arguably just as bad as this Lakers team. Is that true or false? Maybe not quite as bad, but
I think I'd say they're probably a little worse than those teams. But I mean, they have enough. Yeah, you're right. It's just basically the point of all of this is that it's so different for even someone like LeBron to be making the playoffs in the East versus the West. And actually, it's a reevaluation for me. Like I always thought that Davis should have been judged a little bit more harshly for not carrying the team to where it could be in the West. But now I'm thinking that just might be how good it is. Yeah, that's
but it's
a point
also,
to be considered.
You want to give the full context here, and this was the first year in a long time that LeBron missed time with an injury, right? And so the Lakers were probably worse off without him during that stretch. How many games did he miss? Like 15, I would guess?
He missed a ton, man. And I want to say they might have been – I want to say they were hovering around 500 at that point. They might have. I think they were actually like number 4 in the West at the time that he got hurt originally. Now, whether that would have held up,
yeah, we don't know. But I'm not trying to make excuses for LeBron. I'm just trying to give the full context. This is the first year that he's missed time with injury, and it's also coming off a year where he played last year. LeBron James played more minutes than he ever had in his entire career, and he really kind of had I would argue the best year, at least statistically, from his entire career. And I think he played all 82 games, and he played so many minutes, and that's not including the playoffs, of course. And so I'm not trying to be a doctor here, predict injuries, but I'm not really that surprised at this age, coming off that last season where his usage and his mileage was just so intense that this was the first year he got hurt in a long time. So, like I said, I'm not trying to give the Lakers or LeBron an excuse here, but it is to be debated whether the Lakers actually maybe would have made the playoffs had LeBron not gotten hurt, because he's been healthy his entire career. I mean, the guy never gets hurt until the year he also moves to the Western Conference. So it's hard to judge, but I think the point remains is that the Western Conference, not just on paper, but also in reality, is so much more difficult than the East to make the playoffs and to have this legacy going. The thing I hate most about LeBron James' legacy debate is when the people say, "Oh, well, Michael Jordan was 6-0 in, the NBA Finals and he won 6 championships." Knowing that it's a team sport, knowing that LeBron James even got to the championship 9 times and Michael Jordan only got there 6 times, every Jordan, truther is like, "Oh, Jordan's way, way better because he's never lost in the finals." Well, LeBron actually made the finals 9 times, okay, which is more than Jordan. I don't think it detracts from LeBron's legacy by saying that he's not undefeated in the finals. That doesn't do anything for me. I'd rather a player's – no, it really doesn't, honestly. I'd rather a player –
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, I'd rather a guy get there more often and have a chance to win, because I understand that basketball is a star-driven league, and you can affect it more. One player can affect it more individually than, maybe the NFL or football players or almost any other sport, I would argue. But at the same time, the supporting cast still is very important. And LeBron got to the finals 9 times. I mean, I just hate the argument that Jordan's never lost in the finals, but LeBron's been there more, and somehow that's a huge win for Jordan. It really doesn't make any sense to me.
I think it even gets worse when you talk about Kobe, because people are like, well, Kobe has 6 rings. Like, well, Kobe wasn't even the best player. I can't remember if it was 5 or 6, but Kobe wasn't even the best player on those 3 Lakers teams that won championships. So, like, why is he better because Shaq was on his team than LeBron, who had, like, Mo Williams? I think these things are so dumb that people are going to actually say that, like, why is it better that MJ lost in earlier rounds than LeBron losing in the finals? That's so stupid. I think it lacks nuance, and it's just like
stuff that goes on First Take, and then that's what that's what people like to say. Oh, 6-0, like that's their crutch of their argument. If they ever get past that and like look at the context and stuff, then they usually just get not abolished, but that point kind of turns itself on its face. And you know what? I want to be clear though to any listeners. I do think that Michael Jordan is the best player to ever play in the NBA. I really do. But I think LeBron is clearly number 2. I really do. And I think the debate of LeBron or Michael Jordan is worth having, because I do think they're close enough to have the debate. But what a lot of people who argue Jordan or MJ don't understand is that most of the people in this argument would not put LeBron at number 2. I think that's fair to say. They think LeBron's like overrated and things along those lines, but yet they spend so much time arguing LeBron and MJ that the irony is that when you spend that much time arguing LeBron or MJ, you're kind of conceding that LeBron is the second best player, right? Because you're not arguing MJ versus nobody's arguing MJ versus Kobe, right? Who's arguing that?
Well, they shouldn't be.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they debate Kobe versus LeBron, but it's not even close. I'm sorry,
But LeBron's still being debated with Michael Jordan. But you never hear Kobe being debated with Michael Jordan, right? And I think the reason but I think the reason is because they won't admit it, of course. But I think the reason you never hear Kobe versus Michael Jordan anymore is because LeBron has surpassed Kobe. I think that's fair to say, right?
It's not even close. The people actually argue that Kobe was a better shooter from 3, and I was like, well, okay. I mean, I think if I had an open shot, would I rather Kobe or LeBron take it? Probably Kobe.
I'd rather Kobe.
But Kobe shot like 34% from 3 for his career.
He did take
so
more
who cares how good
shots,
you can shoot?
Yeah.
It doesn't. But that's the point, though. Like if you
LeBron
take dumb shots,
yeah, I see what you're saying.
Right. So he's a smarter player.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't understand that argument. Like if you're saying someone's a better shooter and the statistics don't back it up at all, who cares? Like it's not an open gym. It doesn't matter who can make more open shots. It's about like what shots do you choose to take, and other shots that you do choose to take, how many are you making?
I think the eye test.
Anyway, I get so
yeah. No, I know you get. Well, it's a great debate. I think the eye test, and and we kind of started watching basketball during Michael Jordan's. We were watching his prime, but we were young, right? I mean, we were really young in the '90s, and I don't think we could appreciate Michael Jordan's prime as much as we could with LeBron's. But the thing is, I think most people, or most reasonable people, would agree that. I sound like Trump when I say that. Like everyone agrees. No, I think most people would agree that Michael Jordan passed the eye test better than LeBron James. But LeBron James statistically certainly has an argument to be the greatest player of all time. His numbers are like, when you just look at all the numbers, everything. I'm talking about every stat. I'm talking about even wins. I'm talking about champion. I'm talking about everything. When you look at any statistic, I do think LeBron James actually does have a better case to be the greatest player of all time if you're going from a statistical perspective than Michael Jordan. And I think that's where people who watch Jordan, who rely on the eye test, get so frustrated with. You don't want to, of course, make it all about stats, but LeBron's numbers easily rival Jordan's, if not are better. So I think that's indisputable, honestly. And so I think it comes down to just people who have been able to watch both of these guys. And the other argument that I hate, of course, and I didn't even mean to get into a Jordan versus LeBron debate. It's so easy to do nowadays. But the other thing that they argue that Jordan had more of the clutch gene, his killer instinct. LeBron's a flopper and all this. And I just hate that, because that has nothing to do with being a good basketball player. Having a personality that you think is more preferable or is more, conducive to being a winner, I guess, that has nothing to do with judging two basketball players. Just because LeBron flops more than MJ does, that actually might have helped his team. I just hate the personality arguments. Leave personality out of this. The debate is on who's a better basketball player. And just because Jordan was more competitive or, trash talked more than LeBron, who cares about that stuff? We're not debating on who the best trash talker is, and we're not debating on who had a more killer instinct or who had a bigger clutch gene. The debate is who is the greatest basketball player ever, right? So those are the two kind of things. The Jordan crutch arguments are always, Jordan was way more competitive. That's the first one that they make. And the second one they make was, Jordan was 6-0 in the finals. And those arguments to me are, they're worth mentioning, of course. They're not like dumb, but when you're leading with those arguments, when those are your primary arguments, which they are for like the vast majority of Jordan truthers in this debate, those are not good arguments to lead in. And that just that's not your primary go-to argument when you're coming into this. And I kind of lose respect for people who just open up with the 6-0 debate, or like, oh, LeBron's personality, like, he's a baby compared to Jordan. So what? I don't care who's a baby. I care about who's the better basketball player.
Yeah, I don't care about demeanor either. And honestly, I think there is an argument to be made for LeBron statistically. I still think Jordan certainly has his merits, because Jordan was such a high volume scorer in addition to being incredibly efficient relative to his peers. But I mean, I think it's a good debate. I think it's worth having. And I definitely agree with you that it's much more nuanced than just pitching a couple of sort of cliche, clutch gene or whatever arguments, and
right.
It's just not that simple. It never is, and so
right.
Yeah.
But I think we can both agree. So, and like I said, I was kind of arguing for LeBron there, but I do want to reiterate that I do think Michael Jordan is the greatest player of all time, but I think LeBron is catching up, if not like right there with him, kind of a 1B thing, and I just think it's so clear that he's the number 2 player at this point in his career. I think it's fair to say that he's the second best player of all time at least, but a lot of people don't want to go there. But again, we've been ranting, of course, and I want to get back to the Pelicans real quick before we close out the show. We only have 7 games left on the regular season. I know you and I, Michael, have both been hesitant to kind of openly, actively root for losses. But how many games should we be wanting to lose as fans to get us in the best position for the best lottery odds for, hopefully a superstar that can help this team.
Let's be honest here. Like I would love to get. I think we have 8, so I think we're 31-43 right now. I would love to get to 32-50. I'd love to get 7 of those last 8. I mean, 8 of 8 is ideal. 6 of 8 I'd settle for. I think 6 of 8 is probably honestly more realistic for what we would wind up doing, but. No, I want no fewer than 5.
So
I want to lose a lot of games.
Are you familiar with the rest of the schedule in terms of our opponents?
So we lost to the Hawks last time. We're playing the Hawks again. I don't think we're catching the Hawks personally, so I don't think they're a factor. Hawks at home, which I'd hope to lose. I don't think we're competing with them. I only want to lose because I want to lose. Kings aren't tanking, but they're not going to make the playoffs. They'll probably still try to play hard, so they should beat us. Lakers, that's a big one because I think we will be competing with the Lakers. I would love to drop that game.
Right.
Hornets, we're not competing for a spot for them. I think that's a game. I mean, again, I want to lose that game. Phoenix, we're not competing with because they're so bad that there's no chance we're catching them. We can't even statistically do it. I hope we lose that game. We're playing on the road.
That is not going to be a pretty game.
No, it's not. And I mean, then the Kings and then the Warriors.
Who are actively tanking. I can't imagine that's going to be a pretty game that you want to spend your money going to. How many? Last question, real quick. I know we're approaching an hour now. Last question, though. I think a lot of the fans are curious. It seems like Drew and Etuan Moore are out for the year, but Anthony Davis. I know we're kind of trying to slide by this rule, this anti-resting or anti-tanking rule. How many games does he have to suit up in for the rest of the season, you think? Like 3 or 4?
I think it depends on the excuses. I mean, it seems to me that they just have to have some sort of reasonable excuse to sit him out. So, I mean, it's not necessarily about – I do think there's probably a component to where you're saying is like basically of, okay, is he having an excuse every game or is it like every other game or whatever? Probably like 3 games you could probably sit out for whatever. Mm-hmm. I think we can lose. I honestly think if I'm looking at the schedule objectively, I think we're losing we're going either 3-5 or 2-6. I think 2-6 is the most likely, with 3-5 and 1-7 as the ones outside of 2-6 that I think are more realistic. So that's what I'm 2-6. I would be happy with. I'd be happy with that.
And
I know it's terrible, dude, but that's yeah.
Yeah, it always kind of strikes you when you make a comment like that. But that's how the NBA works, and we're doing it to try to get the best odds for a franchise-changing superstar. So in the end, your feelings are justified. But I know that in actual sports, I know that the guys who are actually playing, do want to win the game. And it means a lot for the guys who are on the court, like Elfrid Payton, who, especially the guys like Julius Randle and Payton, and Frank Jackson, of course, but not only the young guys, and Kendrick Williams, who are trying to get the minutes, but also the guys who are impending free agents who want to put on the best show for their future teams. So we're not trying to say that the Pelicans who are on the court are actually not going to be trying. But again, it's more along the lines of putting your team in a position to lose, which is tanking, of course. But I want to be weary about suggesting that the players themselves are not going to try.
I don't think that's the case. I don't think they, especially the ones like you're saying that are playing for contracts, they might be looking for points more than team success, but that's probably not because they want to lose. That's because, well, first of all, if they are playing for just a free agent deal and they're not planning on staying here, then they have no vested interest in the Pelicans anyway. So why would they care about the positioning? Like they're just looking out for their own, and then it happens to align or not align with the Pelicans' prerogatives. So yeah, but we want losses. Let's be very clear. Let's get this on the record.
All right.
I want to lose a lot.